Hey guys, it's Casey from the Montreal Student Network, and today we're going to be looking at the common names associated with the butyl substituents. Now, when we look at butyl, we think of butane. And like we talked about last video, butyl will be a 4-carbon substituent with the YL indicating substituent. So that means it's not its own standalone compound. It's actually a branch attached to something much bigger. Now, R, in case you missed last video, represents the rest of the compound. So that would be the whole parent compound. That's everything else that we don't see. So if we had a little, let's draw it out in bond line right here. Say we had something like this. This here would be a substituent. Obviously, it's not butane. It only has 2 carbons. And this whole thing over here would represent the R rest of the compound. So we'll get rid of that. But just so we know, we're just focusing on branches in this video, and more specifically the butyl branches, which will only have 4 carbons. So we're going to look at the 4 possible ways to rearrange 4 carbons having a R group. Now, we're going to be looking at common names and the official name because there is the UPAC name and there is the common name. Now, the UPAC name and the common name, they're both accepted. And when you're naming, you're likely going to want to use the common name because it's a lot smaller. You're not going to get too confused with a bunch of numbers and a bunch of brackets if you try to use the UPAC name. And I'll show you how to use both. And, you can pick which one you find suits you better. But trust me, you will find yourself going towards the common name. It might seem a little weird trying to memorize them at first, but once you look at the little tricks that I have, it's going to be really simple. So the first one we look at is just arranging the 4 carbons in a straight chain. Now remember, we number them from the R, from the point of attachment, always, no matter what, for alkyl groups. And we can see right there, it's just a straight line, and we'll just call this a standard butyl substituent, like I wrote right there. Sometimes you can call it N-butyl, but for the most part, you're just going to want to call it straight up butyl. So put a capital B right there so you can see. So it's essentially butane, but we have the R group right here. So we just drop the ANE on the end and replace it with YL. So that's the standard way of doing an alkyl naming process. So looking at the one down here, we will go for the UPAC name right now. So like I said, we number from the point of attachment and we number the longest carbon chain. So that's in this direction right over here. And we see on carbon number 1, we have a methyl group. So using just the standard naming, nothing different, we're going to call it 1-methyl propyl. Now remember, we're calling it propyl because it's 3 carbons long on the parent compound. Do not call it butyl. It will be called butyl in the common name, so we're going to have to watch out when we go over the common name. You'll see what I'm talking about. And remember the YL ending because we're talking about a substituent. Now, if you were going to include this on your parent compound, because remember, this is attached to another longer carbon chain with other things on it, you would have to put brackets over this, indicate the number where it's attached, and also write the parent compound back here. So say hexane. So say it was attached to, I don't know, 4. I wrote an X there, but say it was attached to 4, it would be 4. Actually, no, it wouldn't be attached to 4. It would be attached to 2 because it would have to number it the other way. So say it was attached to carbon number 2, it would be 2 hyphen open bracket 1 hyphen methyl propyl close bracket hexane. And you probably have a lot of other things on there right now, so that's kind of confusing. We kind of want to avoid that. So we're going to look at the common name. Now, how do we find common names? There are 4 names you need to memorize, and I'd highly recommend memorizing them. Butyl is one of them. Looking over here, we see that this carbon attached to the R group, get rid of that, is a secondary carbon because it's attached to 2 other carbons. When attached to 2 other carbons, you have a secondary carbon. So the common name, I'll write common name here because I have a lot of other writing going on, is secondary butyl, or simply sec-butyl. And that's what you would call it. And you can just put that in here instead of 1-methyl propyl, and trust me, it is much easier. You're dealing with less numbers, less things to concern yourself with. You don't need to stop on the test and see, okay, let me just count this out and find out the UPAC name. You can just simply remember this. It's a secondary one. It will be the only secondary butyl alkyl group available in this selection that we have right here. So you can automatically say it's secondary butyl or sec-butyl. Now, when you're going to be ordering the names, because remember we order them alphabetical order, you will use the B. So arrange it by B when arranging it with stuff that is not a butyl alkyl group, so not stuff that I'm showing you in this video. If you are arranging it with other substituents, you will take into consideration the S in front of sec. So we're going to look at other ones right now. We're moving down, and you'll notice that they'll all have a different starting thing, and it'll all end with butyl. Now remember, don't get confused. This is one thing I see people get confused with. Propyl is the ending for the UPAC name because its longest carbon chain is 3, but we are only using the name butyl for the common name. So it's still taking into consideration that there is 4 carbons and it's not looking at the longest carbon chain. So keep that in consideration, a good thing to make a note on. So we're going to go with the UPAC name for this one right over here, 1, 2, 3. We see that we have a methyl group on the second carbon. So our alkyl group will be called 2-methyl. And because we have 3 carbons long, it will be propyl. And that's the name of the alkyl group, simple as that. Now once again, that's one thing we kind of want to avoid using the UPAC names for the alkyl groups. So simply, we can see that it is a primary carbon. Now remember, we looked at the standard butyl group, and that's a primary carbon also. These are the only 2 primary carbon butyl groups available. Now you can look at this one right now and know it's just a straight line. It's pretty simple. You know, it looks almost like butane. We're going to call it butyl. So for the one that is primary, right down here, but is not a straight line, we're going to call it isobutyl. Now this one doesn't have a hyphen in it. It's just straight isobutyl. Now, obviously, you'll take the I into consideration when arranging it with other butyls, and if not, you will just take the B into consideration. So only when you have other 4 carbon groups available, other substituents on your parent compound, you'll want to include the I in your alphabetical naming. So isobutyl, I'm going to write down that it's primary, because just remember that isobutyl is primary. Just remember I, alone, I. It's singular, primary, just alone, attached to one other carbon. Little things you can remember. As long as you remember this is primary, you're not going to confuse it with the straight chain butyl group up here. You're not going to confuse it with that because that one's obvious. It looks like butane, and it just has the R group instead of a hydrogen. So that's one little thing to take consideration. This is isobutyl or 2-methylpropyl. You can always use 2-methylpropyl. Remember, they're available. I'm just telling you from experience. I wrote this test. I wrote the final not long ago, and you do not want to get messing with the UPAC names. You don't have a lot of time. You want to just look at it right away, identify it as isobutyl, and use that and move on. It's the easiest way to do it. So looking at the last one, we have our point of attachment. We're going to name it number 1 and 2. Anyway, it's the same thing no matter which way you do it. 1, 2 up here works. 1, 2 like that works. It all comes out to the same thing. We will have 2 methyl groups on 1. So this will be 1, 1. Okay, sorry, I looked at it. I thought I messed it up. It's fine. So it'll be 1, 1. Dimethyl, and we can see that's too long. It will be dimethyl ethyl because it's ethane derivative, ethyl, ethane. It signifies 2 carbons. Yeah, because I have everything written down. I'm looking at my textbook. There's propyl derivatives that I don't want to get mixed up with, so I want to make sure I give you guys the right name. So 1,1-dimethyl ethyl will be the UPAC name, and the standard name. We can see that this carbon right here is a tertiary carbon. It's attached to 1, 2, 3 other carbons. So it's tertiary carbon. And now we can use the same logic that we had with our secondary butyl or sec-butyl and just come up with the abbreviated name tert-butyl. Sometimes called and often called T-butyl. And you can use T-butyl because remember, the only thing that you really need to remember here, and the only important thing is that the T will come into play when you're alphabetically ordering it when other butyl substituents are there. So just having the T, you get the same outcome because you only have S for sec, you have T for tert, and then you have I for iso. Those are the only ones you need. So it doesn't matter that you take out the other letters. So you'll often hear T-butyl arranged, and that is something like this. Or you can draw it out in bond line, would be R, there's your carbon right there, and it's attached to 3 other CH3 methyl groups. So methyl group, methyl group, methyl group, and then you have your tertiary carbon, tert. So those are the 4 butyl substituents. It's something you really want to memorize. They do help, and trust me, it saves a lot of time. It saves a lot of mistakes. Really stupid mistakes can happen when you try to implicate UPAC naming into your thing, your whole compound, because it just gets really cluttered and it gets a mess. And you have all these numbers, you have all these hyphens, you have all these numbers, all these brackets. Why confuse it? Why make it that more confusing? So remember the names. Butyl, it's primary, and it's just a straight line. That one should be already in your head. Now you go down, is it secondary? Well, you can do butyl, secondary butyl, or you can even write secondary butyl. I mean, you'll want to abbreviate it. You want to save time. Going down more, you can say, oh, is it primary? And you can see, well, it doesn't look like a straight chain. It doesn't look like butane, so you can automatically call it iso. It just branches off right here, and it also has the 4 carbons, so it's butyl. Always remember, the ending is butyl. It never switches over to propyl or ethyl down here. And look, this carbon, it's a tertiary carbon attached to the R group point of attachment, and that will make it tertiary, T-butyl, and that's the 3 the 3 other derivatives, with 4 obviously with this one, that you can have with butyl substituents. So if you enjoyed the video, leave a comment. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. It's something that might seem tedious at first. I knew I really didn't want to memorize this, but trust me, it helps. If you can memorize this early on, you'll save a lot of stupid mistakes that can happen on the test, and hopefully you can avoid them. So if you have any questions, requests, please leave them in the comments below, and have yourselves a great day.